The short version of the story is that I first went to Cuba to take piano lessons. A couple years later, I was back there recording. I recorded 2 albums down there, and both of them got nominated for Cubadisco Awards, which is their equivalent of the Grammy. I took a band of 11 Cubans on a tour of Europe. I worked with some of the top figures of the Cuban music business. This all happened over a course of about 7 years, and it was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had in my life. It was incredible. Like Ricky used to say to Lucy, I got some splaining to do. But before we get into the details, do me a favor. If you haven't done so already, please smash that subscribe button down there. It'll do you no harm. Here's how this came about. It was the late 90s, and I had grown incredibly bored with pop music. And I was searching around for something else. I was listening to a lot of music from other parts of the world. I was listening to Pakistani Qawwali music, Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, African music, Senegal, Ghana, South African, Balinese gamelan music. I was looking for something. So I was basically open for something different because I was kind of bored with the same old, same old. This was 1999. A musician friend of mine, Steve Winter, a drummer, called me up and said, you want to go hear a Cuban band in San Diego tonight? And I said, yeah, sure. And I didn't even ask what band it was. Off we went. The band turned out to be Chucho Valdés Irakere. They were playing in Solana Beach at a cool venue called the Belly Up Tavern. I had heard Chucho Valdés before. I'd heard his solo piano CD. In fact, I bought that thing because he's a phenomenal musician. I was blown away. I can't remember how many piece band it was at the time, probably 15 or 16. It was just phenomenal. The musicianship was off the charts. Everybody in the band was a virtuoso. The music was amazing. The arrangements were great. Full of surprises, full of changes, and the rhythm was basically the thing I'd been looking for. It was super complex, anything but predictable, and yet it was funky. It would grab you, you know, but sometimes you'd get disoriented and not even can't find the one because it's a complex rhythm. But it was a great concert, and it was a cool scene because they drew all the salsa dancers from the San Diego area. And these people all seemed to know each other, and they were nicely dressed, and they danced so elegantly. It was just nice. But mostly the music just blew me away and got under my skin immediately. And I'm driving back to Palm Springs, and I'm thinking, I'm gonna learn how to play this music. And initially, I thought maybe I could find a salsa band here in the Coachella Valley that I could at least sit in with or maybe join or whatever. But it turned out there wasn't any, none. So that's how Mamborama came to be. I had to make my own band just to learn this music. But first, I had to start, you know, before I got to that point, I had to start to learn how to do that crazy piano stuff because Cuban piano, salsa piano, if you want to call it that, whatever, is different. The patterns are completely different. And I needed to learn that. And if you just put on a record, it can be hard to learn it by ear because there's so many other things going on. I went searching for books. There were none to be had. I finally found one that I'm not going to mention because it led me down a wrong path, and I picked up some bad rhythmic habits from that I still have of emphasizing wrong beats. But in researching this, now remember this is 1999, so the internet back then wasn't anything like what we have today. It was just barely getting going. But I got online. I used to get a lot of information like a lot of people did from Usenet. And there was a group called rec.music.afro-latin that was very lively, and they discussed all this kind of music. Cuban music in particular. There I met the acquaintance of a guy who I'm still good friends with, Kevin Moore, who is a brilliant musician and musicologist, ethnomusicologist. And since then, he's published over 20 books. are just a few of the books Kevin Moore has written. Man, I could have used this stuff when I was starting out with the Mamborama stuff. But this is what he was doing in the meantime. And he wrote over 20, I don't know how many of these books he's written. Beyond Salsa, he's written tons of these. I needed this, The Roots of the Piano Tumbao, Volume 1. He went on and wrote several volumes just for piano. He did bass. He's got also for dancers and listeners, Beyond Salsa for Beginners. It's incredible amount of scholarship in this stuff. Understanding clave. This is one of the hardest things for American musicians to get, is how clave fits into all of this stuff, which is the basis of it all. Clave to Cuban music is like the backbeat is to rock and roll. It's an integral part. So anyway, Kevin's Beatles book is amazing. It's highly recommended. The guy's a genius, and I'm happy to have him as a friend. So he and I corresponded quite a bit. He was very helpful, even though we'd never met. So anyway, so I'm buying some records here and there, trying to learn how to play this, picking up the patterns, learning the piano, and I put together a group of local guys that I knew and that I'd been playing with over the years in Palm Springs. I figured about the best we could get away with would be a 7-piece group, and even that would be stretching things. And there were times where we had to pull it down to, maybe 5 pieces or even 4 pieces. And then we just call it a straight Latin jazz gig, and I wouldn't let them use the Mamborama name. But Mamborama at first was 7 musicians. It was piano, bass, drums, timbales, congas, trumpet, and tenor sax. And the tenor doubled on flute. And we started rehearsing at my house. And it was fun. I found myself writing songs for the group. The songs went over well at the gigs, and finally we had accumulated enough of them that I decided to record an album. But I was frustrated with my learning process with the piano, so I planned a trip to Cuba. And in April of 2000, I went to Havana for 2 weeks. And by coincidence, Kevin Moore was there at the same time. He was extremely helpful. We met at Casa de la Música in Miramar. And I'm pretty sure that Marcos Crego was there that night. Marcos is the son of Jose El Greco Crego, who is an amazing trumpet player and one of the original founding members of NJ La Banda. Marcos and Kevin had met on some of Kevin's previous trips to Havana. He had been there many times before, and he was an old hand with it. Marcos, at the time, was playing piano for Geraldo Piloto's group Clima, who played some of the most advanced timba going. I mean, Piloto used Brazilian harmony with Cuban rhythms and very cool stuff. So I met them both, and I'm pretty sure that night at Casa de la Música was the first time that I heard Manolito y Su Trabuco. And this was like a fate thing, to meet these people and hear this group at the same time, because it shaped the whole thing. Marcos became a tremendous help to me in the years to come. And Manolito became a good friend, and you'll find out why. There's going to be a series of videos, because it's a lot to pack in. Like I say, it was 7 years, so this is just going to be about the first album. There's a thing about Cuban music that I don't think you get it unless you hear it live. The records are great, and a lot of them, I mean, there are a lot of phenomenal Cuban records, but to experience it live is a completely different thing. And I think that applies to a lot of music, really. I mean, it's like, I mentioned Balinese gamelan music. It certainly blew me away when I was able to hear it in person, more so than that CD I had bought back in the 90s. Marcos and I hit it off right away, and I asked him if he would give me piano lessons, and he just kind of went into aw shucks mode, and he said, well, I don't do that. I'm not a teacher, but I'd be happy to, sit at the piano and talk with you about music. And I said, that's fine. But in between then, he invited me to a rehearsal that Klima was having. But Klima was rehearsing in a school auditorium, and a lot of groups used this auditorium. And it was cool to go to the rehearsal and see how they operated. Got to meet Piloto, and everybody was super nice. And what planted a seed in my brain was that Piloto was recording the rehearsal with a couple of ADAT units. ADATs, you don't see them anymore. That was an old digital format. They would record 8 tracks at a time, and you could sync multiple units up together. And they were a thing before everything became computer-based. But Piloto was recording in this auditorium, and I thought, that might be something I could do. I filed that away for future use. Then the next thing that happened is Kevin wanted me to go hear Isaac Delgado, but Manolito was playing again at this little club. It was not even a club, an open-air joint on the Malecon. I was so knocked out by their music and their energy that I decided to go hear them twice in a row. And I'm glad I did, because what happened there, everything started steamrolling just from a simple conversation. When they took a break, I started up a conversation with their flute player, who later, he and I became super good friends, David Bencomo. One of the nicest guys you'll ever meet in the world, super talented musician. But I complimented him on the band, and I told him that I was a piano player, and he said, oh, you have to play with us. And I said, no, I'm not ready for that, no. But I'm just enjoying listening. He went and told, without me knowing, he went and told Manolito, see that American guy over there? He's a piano player. So they're playing their second set, and I'm standing right in front of the bandstand, because it wasn't even like a stage. It was like maybe a 1.5 feet off the ground. And Manolito points at me and says, come on up. And I'm like, yeah. But I thought, all right, what the hell? If I make a fool of myself, who's gonna know? And I get on the bandstand, and Manolito held out his hands to spell out a G minor chord just to show me where they were. That was very helpful. And so I started just improvising, playing a solo, and didn't stretch it out too long. And I ended up by playing very rudimentary Cuban tumbao, the name for that's the name of those piano parts. And they loved that, the fact that I was, trying to sound Cuban. And that was the beginning of a beautiful friendship, not just with David, but with Manolito and also all the guys in his band. It was just the feeling. To step onto that bandstand, this is just like a little club, open air on the Malecon, beautiful night. But to step on that bandstand felt like being plugged into an electrical socket. The energy and to start playing with them was like one of the most electrifying things I've ever done. It was just, man. I mean, if I wasn't hooked before, I was definitely hooked then. Unbelievable. As time went on, I sat in with all of them. I sat in with Los Banban, Eneje La Banda. I mean, I got to know all of them. Cubans are beautiful, welcoming, sharing people. Everybody who knows has been to Cuba, they know the Cuban people are very special. Manolito invited me to come hang out with him at Igrem Studios, where he was recording his new album, and that was extremely cool. If you've seen Buena Vista Social Club, that's where they recorded that. But beyond that, this studio, it was started in 1944. And going in there, I just got goosebumps because I could just feel the spirit of all the great music that has been recorded in there over, nearly 60 years. Nat Cole recorded there, besides all the great Cuban artists. It's just a fantastic place, and I was really sad to see when I was researching photos for this that it has ceased to be. It's been dismantled and is no more. Ephemeral, like so much of this is gone. But I got to see it, and it was very cool. So it wasn't until the end of that trip that I got to have my lesson with Marcos. He wouldn't take any money for it. I offered. And we spent 4 hours sitting at the piano. His grandmother would bring in little cafecitos, little cups of espresso, about once an hour. And so we were wired on caffeine, and we went from 7 at night to 11 o'clock at night. And we went through every kind of music. And Marcos was had to be in his early 20s then. He was very young. And I was like, hey, maybe there's something I can show this guy in exchange. He won't take money. And, I'd say, well, what about jazz? Do you like jazz? He said, oh, I love jazz. And he starts playing bebop and this and that. And, I like Bill Evans. And he knew more about jazz than I did. I said, what about classical music? Even though I don't know anything about classical music, very rudimentary. And he said, oh, I love classical music. There wasn't anything I could show him, but he was happy to spend time. We just got along. Personalities, we became buddies. We would just go hang out. We would drive around Havana. He had a car. He's the greatest guy in the world. And so I made so many friends there. It was amazing. It was just an amazing time. And 2 weeks just went by, boom, like that. And then I'm back. But then I really decided that I wanted to record the original songs that I'd been writing for Mamborama. And we had been working for, there was this club that opened up in Palm Springs called Muriel's. And the guy who owned it had cashed out a internet company, and he was flush with cash. He was spending money like mad and bringing in, every weekend he'd bring in a salsa band from LA or a swing band. They did concerts. Katie Lang played there, Dr. John, a bunch of other people. And we played there all the time. I mean, I remember one month I played at Muriel's 20 times in various forms. Sometimes we'd play just a trio Latin jazz set, and sometimes it'd be the full group. That's where I met Nege Hernandez, and Nege's from Havana, and he'd been in LA only maybe a year or so. And I asked him, I said, if I go record, would you be willing to record with us? And he said, oh yeah, man. But what you ought to do, I'd rather play congas, because you should get this guy Jimmy Brantley to play timbales, because he's amazing. So that's how I met Jimmy Brantley. And Jimmy Brantley is indeed amazing, one of the best musicians I've ever worked with, bar none. So we went and recorded in LA. We did the basic tracks. This was the last record that I produced on tape, 2-inch 24-track tape. I found a fairly reasonably priced studio in the Valley, and we did the basic tracks there. They had a nice Yamaha 7'6" grand piano, and we did all the basic tracks there, and then we did the overdubs at a studio that had inherited all of Alan Zentz's equipment, and it was in a loft in downtown LA. And we did the overdubs and mixed it there. And I had 500 copies pressed up, and like I said, it was just meant to sell at gigs. And this is what it became. The artwork is based on an amazing place where they have Roombas on the weekends. And it's festooned with all this very cool art. And I based this artwork on what I saw at the Callejón de Hamel. this was it. So we, got it pressed up, had 500 copies. Finally, one day I get a phone call from Italy. It's a guy named Mauro Fetti, Torino, Italy. And he says, I want to know if I can order some Mamborama records from you. And I said, sure, yeah, how many you want? He said, I want 250. I said, wow, yeah, I'd be happy to. And, we worked out a price. And I said, how did you come to hear about this? I'm surprised to get a call from Italy. And he said, Bill, you don't know. And I said, what? All of Italy is dancing to Mamborama. You could have knocked me over with a feather. But later I found out that in the salsa world, the DJs share and share alike, and music spreads virally. And it was especially Cuba te Llama became, and still is, a standard for salsa dancers. As a songwriter, I always aspired to write a standard. I didn't realize that when I did it would be such a dumb song, but that thing lives on. I'm going to be doing a 25th anniversary video for it shortly, because it's everywhere. I heard it played in a discotheque in Madrid. So that's the start of the Mamborama story. And it continues. I did 2 more records. Like I said, it was a great experience. There will be more. This is going to be a series. As always, thank you very much for watching. And I realize this is a departure from synthesizers and Michael Jackson stories, but this was something that I experienced that was amazing, and it really rejuvenated my creativity at a time when I was just bored and needed something to do. And it was great. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you later, as they say in Cuba. Ciao, pescado, vuelto picadillo. Try to figure that one out. Okay. Ciao.